Okay.
So should we start proper 10:02?
10:02 or so, yeah. 10, right. People are now starting to roll in, so.
Hey, good morning, folks. We're gonna just give it another minute or so to let some more people on board here. Need some background music here, Katie.
Sorry, I feel like Joel has that river playlist that he played at the maybe the first one.
Yeah, I know. I wasn't thinking about it this morning, but next time.
Well, maybe everybody can, I think we asked this before, everybody should drop their favorite river song or river themed song into the chat, and maybe we'll get a playlist together for next time.
Great.
All right, we got 51 here right now, which is a pretty solid start. So I think we're probably good to go.
Yeah, I agree. All right, folks. Well, yeah, feel free to drop your favorite river song into the chat. Also, feel free to maybe put your name and who you're with, who you're here representing, or your role, anything of interest, favorite river, that sort of thing, without doing formal introductions. But welcome all. Welcome to another wonderful webinar 4 in our Fluvial Futures series. We're going to be talking with the city of Greeley today and the River Corridor Initiative. We're really excited. Part of the overall vision of this webinar series was to not only welcome and bring the community together of those folks that are interested in fluvial hazard mapping, but also and certainly to provide more technical information, programmatic information, but also to reach out and see what else is happening around the state, learn from our peers, and share some success stories, share some challenges, a little bit of everything. So yeah, this is the 4th webinar of a planned 5 that we're doing. Definitely put down October 14th on your calendar. We're going to be talking about how to utilize fluvial hazard zones for creating opportunities for restoration, conservation, flood protection, all the benefits that we see through this mapping. And so yeah, again, today we're at the 4th series. Who we are a team of folks, a few, certainly Chris Sturm, most of you folks know, who is the head of the watershed program at the Colorado Water Conservation Board. Andrea is our kind of technical liaison staff member that's helping us kind of run the program overall at the state level. We're Katie Yacht, who's on the call here this morning with Watershed Science and Design out of Longmont, myself, Michael Blazewitz with Round River Design here in Salida, Colorado, and our colleague, Dr. Joel Schultes, who is based out of Grand Junction with Washwater Engineering and Science. And the 3 of us, Katie, Joel, and myself, are the primary authors of the Colorado Fluvial Hazard Zone mapping protocol, and kind of have been technically responsible for developing the program and providing guidance for you all, and continuing to envision what it can become, and provide trainings and anything else that we can do to help get this program out there into the world. As you may or may not know, the program is housed under the Colorado Water Conservation Board's watershed and flood protection section. That's the section that also hosts a lot of these other grant programs, river funding, stream management planning, has different responsibilities such as disaster recovery and responsibilities over like stream corridor construction, or at least guidance for it. And of course, many of you know about our Wildfire Ready Watersheds program, which is utilizing the fluvial hazard zone mapping, but is another program in and of itself. So yeah, both of these programs are really meant to support the larger planning efforts at the state with the watershed and flood protection section, and looking at our kind of holistic viewpoints of perspectives on watersheds and water management. For those of you who have not joined the series before, but are looking potentially to brush up or learn some new things, we do encourage you to go to our website, coloradofhz.com, and at the top you'll find a tab called Learn. And amongst many other videos that we've got up there, towards the bottom you'll find the webinar series. We've been posting the webinars, and this one is being recorded, and we will have it posted probably by the end of the week. So you can go back and relearn, rewatch. Also want to remind people or let folks know that we are doing some upcoming trainings. We've actually got one next week in Steamboat at the Colorado Stream and Floodplain Managers Conference up in at Steamboat. We'll be doing about a couple-hour training called Where the River Meets the Road, and helping especially floodplain managers, but really anyone that's kind of working in their communities to be thinking about how to utilize fluvial hazard zone maps for their planning efforts. And then we'll be at the Sustaining Colorado Watersheds Conference in October to talk about really more focused on the wildfire ready action plans and utilizing fluvial hazard zone maps and applications for folks that are in that process in one way or another. And again, many more resources. I encourage you all to visit resources more about the program, how it differs from regular traditional floodplain mapping. Yeah, lots of stuff we posted on there, lots of small flyers and things that could maybe help you with ideas or challenges in your community. So that's it for me today. I'm really happy to have our presenters here. We've got Victoria Leonhardt from the City of Greeley, who's Urban and Regional Planning Manager. We've got Gregory Lichty, who's a Senior Associate with Michael Van Valkenburg, and we've got Emily Alcott, who's an old college grad student, colleague of mine, who's now with Intrafluve, who's a principal ecologist and geomorphologist for them. And we're really thrilled to have them all here, and I'm going to turn it over to their bright minds and ideas. So thanks a lot. Go ahead, Victoria.
Thank you. All right, let me get my... All right, can everyone see my screen?
Yep, looks great.
Great. Well, thank you, Michael, and thanks everyone for the opportunity to share a little bit today about the Poudre River Restoration Initiative that we have going on in Greeley. I do want to emphasize that we're still in the early stages of this initiative. We are undertaking a visioning process right now. And so most of what I'll share today should really be thought of as emerging themes or considerations, and we have a lot of work ahead of us. Part of that work is really developing and building that community buy-in. So I'm optimistic that we'll have an adopted plan early next year, but I will be honest, there are some difficult conversations that have come out of this work. The Poudre River Restoration Initiative really has highlighted a lot of complexities and trade-offs that must be thought about in this Poudre River corridor. And so it's another reason why these conversations really matter. All right, so for those of you who don't know, the story of Greeley is deeply tied to water. The Poudre River is the reason the community exists, and early settlers saw it both as beautiful and life-sustaining, a place described as a veritable Eden. This painting from 1876 shows that earlier landscape. We see broad shorelines, cottonwood forests, shallow marshes, and the river shaped not only the land, but really the identity for the community. Fast forward to today, and certainly in our more urban reaches, the river tells a different story. While there are some healthy stretches, the parts running through the city have been squeezed, modified, and degraded over decades. There are many dedicated individuals and teams who have been working on the Poudre River and are very dedicated. But as a whole, a lot of our compounding decisions over time have resulted in a river that has been really taken for granted, treated as background infrastructure rather than a living system. I apologize, this one's a little bit blurry, but as you can see, the river has changed over time. We have some meanders that have since been straightened out. And between 1950 and 2019, the length of the Poudre within City of Greeley limits alone shrank by about 15%, which equates to 2 miles. And even though in some areas the floodplain can be up to 4,000 feet wide, the channel itself is confined to as little as 30 feet. So that loss of space comes with consequences: faster flows, more sediment, severe bank erosion, habitat loss, and a river that residents can't easily access, either as a resource or an amenity. And none of these changes happened over time. I love this graphic because it shows the city of Greeley as it's grown. You can also see the river straightening out over time. And so a lot of these changes are really, nothing malicious, right? But all of these smaller individual decisions accumulate over time and really have led to some long-term vulnerability in the corridor. So this slide, you can see this dotted line around here. This represents our long-range expected growth area. And then we have the Poudre River corridor almost right through the middle of that. And so even though our historic growth pattern has really moved south and west from the river, we are starting to see some development pressure up north. And so if the entire long-range expected growth area was built out, we really see the Poudre River as directly in the middle of that growth. And the important thing about this slide is that it really tells us that we're in a moment right now. It's a real important window of opportunity. So before all of this land is developed or built out, we really want to put in place a framework that empowers the river and protects its natural function while also making sure that it remains a community asset. And so timing is critical. Another important piece to set the stage is to really recognize the significant flood risk that our community faces. As you can see, the Poudre River corridor in Greeley is really complex, especially from the flood risk perspective. In some places, we see the floodway splitting, which puts both our buildings and infrastructure not only at risk, but it's even more complicated in terms of emergency response. So Greg will talk more about how we arrived at this study area in phase 2. But we really focused on stretches of the river where interventions could have the most impact. So we see areas that combine high degradation with high risk to people and property. And the numbers really are striking. We have more than 300 structures just within this map extent that are within the regulatory floodway, and another 1,000 that are within the 100-year floodplain. Unfortunately, in the city of Greeley, fewer than 5% of those properties carry flood insurance. And so this tells us that the risk is widely underappreciated, and most property owners are financially unprotected if a major flood occurs. So again, this really underscores why thoughtful system-wide planning is essential, both to protect people and to strengthen the health of the river. So the Poudre River Restoration Initiative Master Plan is a 20-year long-range plan. And so this is really our chance to reset our relationship with the Poudre River. This is not a narrow technical study or a regulatory guide at this point. It's a vision plan. So it's intended to be bold, long range, and again, really meant to reframe our relationship. So here are listed all of the goals of the Poudre River Restoration Initiative Master Plan. And right at the top is that flood mitigation, like I was mentioning. So this priority really anchors everything else. Safety has to come first. But this vision is also about balance. So we want to pair that flood mitigation with ecological restoration, recreation, and growth. So at its core, this plan really asks, what kind of river corridor do we want the next generation to inherit? I'm sharing this slide because it's important to note that when we talk about a master plan, what type of plan this is. So again, this is very much intended to be visionary, bold, long range, and again, looking out 20 years. And so the purpose isn't to solve individual isolated problems. It's really to chart a different path forward. And so even though there is still a lot of uncertainty along the Poudre River corridor, and this plan won't solve all of that, it's not a fully worked out design, but it will help us understand how we can balance safety, ecology, recreation over the long term and really begin to start shifting the way we've been thinking about these things. Okay, with that, I will hand it over to Emily.
Thanks, Victoria. Greg, you want to go before me or you want me to go?
Yeah, I'll go ahead and go.
Oh, I'm sorry.
That's all right.
Okay.
Just build the suspense.
All right. Okay, so I'm going to talk a little bit about the river as a spine. I'm Greg Lichty. I'm a landscape architect with Michael Van Valkenburg Associates. So I'll be focusing kind of more about the design of the master plan and how we really think about improving places through social connections and recreation and wildlife habitat. So just breaking my presentation down here into 3 parts.
Hey, can I stop you? We can't see your slides, unfortunately.
Okay.
Yeah.
Thank you for
And I know we want to though. So
Yeah.
let's get them up.
All right. I wonder if that was a full screen issue. All right. I may just have to keep it in this view if that's okay. Can you see them now?
I cannot. I only see your profile picture.
Okay. Try this one more time.
Same.
Really?
Yeah. Are you guys seeing the same thing, Emily?
Yep.
Yeah.
Okay.
Do you want me to share them, Greg?
Yeah, why don't you share, Emily? Not sure what's going on there.
Yeah. Yeah, I feel like we can't have a landscape architect present and not see the visuals.
More visuals, yeah.
Yeah.
Thanks everyone for bearing with us here.
Okay, sharing. Hopefully sharing. See.
Yep.
Yeah, there we
That
go.
works. Great. Thank you guys.
Great. Thanks, Emily. All right, so we can skip ahead to the next slide. Yeah, so I'm just going to break it down into, who are we, what are we doing, what have we learned so far, and then in part 3, we'll talk about how we're approaching design. So, like I said, I'm with Michael Van Valkenburg Associates. Next. And we have a history of working on really complex, large-scale master plans that take anywhere from 10 to 30 years to implement. Some of our more notable projects: Brooklyn Bridge Park, Maggie Daley Park in Chicago, the Gateway Arch National Park in St. Louis, and Tulsa Riverfront Revitalization in Tulsa, Oklahoma. We build over 85% of the projects that we design, and so we have a long history of master planning with the intent of implementation, and that's something that we really take a lot of pride in. We've also established a very robust portfolio of work on the water's edge, whether that's on the ocean front or on the Great Lakes or on various rivers across the country and across the globe. So I want to look at the overall project extent. As Victoria mentioned, we're looking at the entire length of the Poudre River as it passes through Greeley's urban growth boundary, and then as it merges with the South Platte to the east there. So these reaches were identified in a previous regional study of the Poudre River, and so we have kept these this nomenclature and these reaches as they were really well defined. But when we were looking at defining, as we moved into our master planning for the Poudre River, we wanted to select a smaller portion of the river that we could really start to focus on proposing design interventions for. To the next slide. So we ended up selecting this portion of the entire reach that's highlighted in green here. And there's a number of reasons why we came to this site. A lot of them had to do with trying to capture as much public property as we could, but it also really came down to this being one of the most degraded sections of the river, as Victoria had mentioned previously. Go ahead. And so just taking a quick look at some of our drone photos that we took as we were studying this section of the river, you'll see a lot of kind of common themes here, and that is the river's very restricted. Most of the crossings that cross the Poudre River through this section are really narrow and are constricting the passage of sediment and floodwaters. There's not a lot of great pedestrian connectivity across the river. We do have the Poudre River Trail, which is a really amazing amenity for the residents that a lot of people have worked really hard to implement over the years. But besides the Poudre River Trail, there's not really a lot of good ways to access the river. It's actually really hard to get to the river in Greeley. We also have a significant amount of active and dormant gravel mining that happened in the floodplain over the years, and is continuing to happen. Continue. Or next. And some of these are being used for recreation, but they're not necessarily, weren't designed with the intention of being used for recreation. So they kind of lack a lot of the amenities that you would expect to see in a public recreation, especially in a water-based public recreation site. And so we are looking to propose improvements for that as well. Next. And here's a section that goes through downtown, right to the east edge of downtown. And again, you'll see really constricted aperture on that bridge opening, a lack of sidewalks. You'll see, the sediment deposition downstream due to the constriction from the bridge, and just a really, a river that's been kind of pushed as close to the edges of its bank width as possible. Next. This is a section through Island Grove Park where we're seeing much more of kind of these conditions. We do have some nice cottonwoods along this section on the riverbanks, but again, it's a fairly constricted corridor here, and we are seeing a lot of exposure, which makes the trail and user experience obviously really uncomfortable, and as well as affects the quality of the water for fish habitat. Next. So what have we learned so far? Next. We split this project into two phases. When we started the project, we wanted to take phase one and dedicate that to information gathering and analysis, because we knew there was a significant amount of work that had been done in the city so far, and there was a significant amount of plans to review so that we could understand and build off of the work that had been done before. We also really wanted to engage in a really robust public outreach process. And then in the second phase, we went into proposing implementation or proposing interventions on the river corridor, rather, for that smaller section I highlighted earlier. So for our public engagement process, we ended up reaching about 950 people in the city of Greeley. We got about over 6,000 responses, whether it was online or at our public engagement events. We had 6 in-person outreach events, 3 online surveys. We met with city staff and the steering committee a number of times, and we had also a significant amount of meetings with third-party stakeholders. As you can imagine, there's a lot of stakeholders and a lot of people that really care about the future of the Poudre River in the city of Greeley. But some of the common themes that we heard from the public were really inspiring, really. A lot of people really love the river, and they want to see it be a higher quality place for both for the river system itself, but also for wildlife. And they also would like to see expanded recreation opportunities. I think the Poudre River Trail has really given everyone a taste of what could be possible here, and they would love to see that expanded. Next. So these are just a few photos from some of our public outreach events. Thanks to Victoria, we had some really fun pop-up events at Weld Walls, which is a mural festival in Greeley, farmers market, as well as our more structured public meetings with the community. As I mentioned, we were provided with over 31 previous planning documents. We gathered 150 plus layers of data for our GIS modeling. And we really were able to take that wealth of information and start to really, sort through it and read the landscape and kind of understand better some of the issues that are facing the city. Next. So as we began approaching the design, go ahead. We wanted to establish kind of a common ground to work off of. And so towards the end of our phase one process, we developed a series of master planning principles. And we broke these down into 5 categories. There's information gathering and historical context, governance and economic development, recreation and access, flood mitigation and infrastructure, and habitat and ecology. And this was really, the purpose of these were really to identify issues kind of within these categories, and then talk about kind of a high level way to address those issues. And this was able to, get the stakeholders and city staff and the public all on the same page about, yes, we agree there's an issue, and yes, we agree that it can be solved. So I'm going to highlight just a few of these. I'm not going to go through all of them. They're all we love all these, and I think they're all very important. And thanks to my colleague, Elisa, she developed these really beautiful watercolor vignettes to really capture the essence of each of these. You can go next, Emily. So one of the observations, Victoria mentioned this, was that the river's lost its length and lost its room to move. And we hope that this master plan will reclaim the experience of a natural landscape along the river corridor where possible. The city does not currently have a process to make land use decisions that create a resilient corridor, establish a clear, meaningful boundary between allowable development and the river corridor. And this is kind of where some of this, the fluvial hazard zone planning comes into play. Next. An observation that there's insufficient opportunity and access points for all types of recreation along the corridor. We really want to make the Pooter a fixture of everyday life by improving access through inclusive design. So we just want people to be able to easily access it and use it on a regular basis. Recreating in and around the river is unsafe for multiple reasons in some stretches, and we want to increase urban and nature-based recreational opportunities along the corridor. One of our main observations is that the paths are too few and do not provide meaningful connections. And so we hope to create circulation loops at many different scales and connect back to the city fabric. And another observation is that the natural floodplains are developed and are disconnected from the river, which increases flood risk and impacts river health. So we really want to seek opportunities to expand the floodplain and improve storage and river health. So Victoria shared this map as well, but I think it's really important to see because, as she pointed out earlier, there's a long-range expected growth area the city's established, and you can really see that from an urban design perspective, the Pooter River has really been a boundary to the city of Greeley. It's really like a northern and eastern boundary to the way that the city's been developed. And with the proposed expansion of the city to the north and to the east, we really think that this is a perfect time to really be planning for the river before we really are locked in, as so many other places are already. And so, we are really appreciative that the city has identified the river as being a really consequential feature of their city and have dedicated the time and resources to plan for its future, to give it space to move and to make it a healthier corridor for the long term before we get locked in. So just touching quickly on access here. So this is within just our phase 2 study area. But one of the things that we really noticed is, like I mentioned earlier, your only access to the river really is from the Pooter River Trail. And so you'll see these purple dots that we've highlighted here. These indicate where you can access the trail, which is really kind of accessing the river. And then those concentric circles are 5 and 10-minute walks. And so one of the issues that we see right now is when you get onto the trail, you really have really long stretches in between your next access point, which isn't ideal from a safety perspective. It also isn't ideal from a connectivity perspective as well. And so we really are hoping to address this in our master plan. And we think that the river corridor can really be a spine for connectivity. Next. So what we've done then is we've looked at the surrounding context of the Pooter River corridor, and we've identified where we think that we can actually improve connectivity significantly for pedestrians, but also make the traffic experience more optimal as well. So we're showing a multi-use trails on both sides of the river, a significant amount of secondary and tertiary trails within the corridor that are probably hard to see in this slide. But proposing also that those multi-use trails are grade separated underneath the underneath the river crossing bridges. And we're actually reducing the total number of vehicular crossings in this plan, but the ones that remain are to be enhanced and elongated so that they can span the flood and not impede the flow and impede sediment transport. So the impetus of this project really is flood mitigation, proactive flood mitigation, thinking about and planning for the large flood that we know is going to come. And working with Interfluve, we were able to do some really basic preliminary modeling and determine that we believe that we can contain a 100-year flood within a 650-foot width river corridor. And so you'll see at the top here, we have a more of a typical section that you would see on 98% of the time. And then the section at the bottom where in a flood condition where those banks would fill up, the corridor would fill up with the flood water. And it's important to note too that the current extents of the flood, of the 100-year flood width, as you saw on the map that Victoria shared earlier, really ranges between 2,000 and 4,000 feet. So while 650 feet is a really wide corridor, if you think about it from the perspective of removing a 4,000-foot swath area from the 100-year floodplain, it actually seems like a pretty good trade-off. So now that we have a corridor width that we can work with, we wanted to take a look at the broader corridor and think about how we can provide that recreation, provide that habitat value that the residents told us that they really desire and value. So we came up with a number of program typologies and dispersed them along the corridor. You'll see the green swath in the center is really that's our river corridor program, and that's our where we expect to and hope to contain the 100-year flood. And then we have other park programming, some of that gravel pond programming I was mentioning earlier, where we really hope to enhance those bodies of water for really high quality water recreation for the residents of Greeley, understanding that's also part of the city's really valuable water storage portfolio. And so working within the confines of maintaining that portfolio. In the kind of aqua blue, you'll see that we've space planned for stormwater parks. The city has a separate master plan underway for improving the storm drainage system in the downtown area. And we're going to need to space plan for some water quality basins to discharge and trap sediment and debris before it enters into the river during those storm events. So we've space planned for those as well. And then we also believe that, a great urban river is also experienced, from a place of leisure. And so we've set aside some urban district programming where we would love to see things like restaurants near the river, maybe some multi-use development and other recreational sites that could be constructed along the river corridor where appropriate. And then obviously there's a significant amount of events like the Greeley Stampede, as well as the Weld County Fair and others that utilize Island Grove Park for those events. And so we've set aside some of that land for that as well. And so this is our updated vision. This is Vision 2045. And we are really excited about how this has come together through this process working with the city. And we acknowledge that this is a very bold transformational vision, but we really think that this will set up the city and the residents for the long term from the perspective of flood mitigation and having a really world-class recreational facility, as well as really significantly improving wildlife habitat and ecological value within this corridor that currently is, like I said earlier, in a pretty degraded state. So, and then with that, we've also developed some beautiful renderings that we want to share with you that kind of illustrate how we hope this corridor could look if implemented. So this is showing that river corridor program, and this is a view that would be in the springtime snowmelt where the river is higher and there's a higher amount of quantity coming down the river. The city is also working on a separate water quality initiative, and we hope that someday the quality of the water within the Cooter River would be suitable for tubing, and this could be a really fun activity in Greeley when further up in the Cooter, the water is a little bit too high, too rough to be tubing. You can come down to the slower stretch in the spring and start your tubing adventures down here. We're also seeing some great. Oh, sorry, Emily. We're also seeing some gravel bars, sandbars, and then also some large wood habitat features that are for bank stabilization as well on the outer stretch of the river. And this is showing what we hope to achieve with our gravel pond program. We think that really pulling back some of those slopes and introducing some beaches, as well as like really creating these beautiful habitat islands that can be just really incredible migratory bird habitat, as well as providing great aquatic life habitat as well. These could be really special places in the city of Greeley. And this is just showing our stormwater park programming. So we really think that these stormwater parks can be multi-use. Obviously, they won't be full of water the vast majority of the time. And so starting to think about what other uses could we put in these areas that wouldn't be detrimentally harmed when they do fill up with water. So this is just one option where we might put some sports fields in these water quality basins. And then this is a view showing proposed Upland Neighborhood Park, where we've got some great new little neighborhood parks right along the river that really give residents that access to the river that they really don't have right now, or that's really hard to find right now. And so we think it'd be great to introduce some little neighborhood parks along the corridor that would really make that river part of the community's everyday lives. And then we also see an opportunity for some destination park programming along the corridor and really having some very exuberant, exciting play spaces right along the river that will really start to form these core memories for the children that grow up in Greeley about going down to the river and having just an incredible day. And with that, we'll turn it over to Emily.
Thanks, Greg. Let me share.
And if folks want to put some questions in the chat, we can start queuing them up for Dr. Emily.
Thanks, Joel. Can you see a full screen PowerPoint slide?
Yeah, we see you.
Excellent. All right, so I'm going to really lean into a metaphor that I've heard my friends at the Fluvial Hazard Zone program use related to blue Sharpies. So here we have a map of Greeley in the early 1900s with the Poudre River as this very thin blue line working away from the left to the right hand side of your screen. You can see early 1900s really in this grid pattern here on the screen. And these original maps really represent rivers as thin blue lines. It's as if these GLO and other surveyors went around and had the smallest fine tip Sharpie that they could find. I'm not sure how they carried that through the wilderness and kept it drawing, but they kept them in good shape and drew very narrow, orderly river corridors. But you all, either from personal experience or from the news or from what you've learned in this program, know that rivers move and flood. And if a river could draw its own corridor, it would use this ultra king size Sharpie, the biggest one that it could find on the store shelves. And lucky for all of us, we now have the Fluvial Hazard Zone protocol, which is the river planner's equivalent of the supersized king size Sharpie. But unlucky for all of us and Victoria and her colleagues, there was not this blue Sharpie, king size blue Sharpie in the early 1900s river planning. So both Greg and Victoria have shown this slide, but weaving it together, river planners face challenges related to people, property, and infrastructure. And these problems are expected just to get worse, as you can see in the red dashed outline, which is the long-range expected growth area for Greeley. So the question here is, how do we right-size a corridor to work within these challenges, within these constraints? So as a river scientist, I would always love to use the Sharpie on the left-hand side, but we need a suite of Sharpies to work with because we have a range of experiences of property ownership, of people, of uses, all these things that Grace and Victoria have talked us through so far. So today, I'm going to go through 3 strategies to balance healthy river corridors and flood-ready communities. If you, as a river scientist, are asked to give a boundary to a landscape architecture or city planner friend, what are the suite of Sharpies that you can use? And just a little framing caveat that river corridor planning recipe in urban settings is a complex recipe, and there's a lot going on, and a lot of people do a lot of work trying to understand all the different parts and pieces of this recipe. So first, my favorite, we have the science. This is relatively easy now that we have this great protocol of how to draw these fluvial hazard zone planning lines. But we also add in people, we also add in complex property ownership, and we also add in infrastructure. So what is easy from the science perspective, it's way harder once you add these other three. But lucky for us, we have landscape architecture friends and friends like Victoria to help you along the way. So I'd really encourage the river scientists, geomorphologists, engineers on the call to lean into their friends in landscape architecture. I was already come back to you and say, that's great that you want to use that huge Sharpie, but we've got a lot of other challenges. So what else can we use? So now we'll go through our 3 strategies to balance healthy river corridors and flood-friendly communities. All right, our first challenge, iconic Greeley is at risk of flood damage. So some of you live and work in Greeley, but others of you may know of the Greeley, one of the most iconic events in Greeley, the Greeley Stampede. And this has a long and rich heritage dating back to the early 1800s. More recently, you could see a competitor like this gentleman here at the same time as you could see Ludacris in the evening. So we zoom in on where this fierce competitor is sitting in space. When we zoom back out, you can see the home of the Greeley Stampede here circled in yellow. You can see some somewhat recent FEMA flood maps where you have the 100-year flood here in blue, and then you have this orange hatch line, which is the regulatory floodway working its way across your screen. And the main stem center line of the Poudre River is the thin blue line that goes from the upper left to the lower right-hand side of your screen. So challenge 1 is iconic Greeley is at risk of flood damage. This is obviously a safety problem for the people of Greeley, as Victoria and Greg have gone through, but also a problem for the development of Greeley because they are interested in expanding the Greeley Stampede. But if you are in the regulatory floodway, there are significant restrictions, rightfully so, on what you can build, where, and why. So we see that these updated flood maps show that Greeley Stampede, which is located at today's Island Grove Park, is actually an island on the regulatory floodway. Challenge for us was when we delineated the fluvial hazard zone, which is challenging in urban settings. It's actually outside of the fluvial hazard zone, so we had to come up with a way to make it work for the Greeley Stampede and the constraints that are there now. So back to our friend and his spot on the island. We're going to go back to using that ultra fine point Sharpie, because that's really the best case that we could achieve in this area, given people, property, infrastructure, and the iconic event. So we leaned into hydraulic modeling and looking at the base flood elevation. How can we lean more towards the engineering side of nature-based solutions to engineer a floodway around Island Grove, but get creative so we can make it work, both to improve the destination aspects of the already iconic Greeley Stampede, but make it work for the floodway and for safety and for passing the 100-year flood. So we did some hydraulic modeling and worked with MBVA, basically mimicked what you see here in the base flood elevation maps, where you have Island Grove returning as an island, making space for that 100-year flood around Greeley Stampede, which could make space and room for to expand that facility as really continues to grow. Strategy number 2, probably the hardest of the strategies, is there's a lot of middle ground between leaning into the engineering side and the more fluvial hazard zone style, which is the third solution. So we have a patchwork of ownership, which Greg talked a lot about. Zooming in here, we have a LiDAR image with the main stem Poudre River, again in that thin blue line, weaving its way across from left to right. And we have a lot of gravel ponds around the river corridor. So there are places we can give a little bit of land, but this is privately owned. And there's some important use, but not all of the land. And there aren't any fluvial signatures to work with, which is an important part of delineating the fluvial hazard zone and more quote unquote natural landscapes. So I understand there are a lot of planners and non-river scientists or engineers on the call. So quick interlude, what is a fluvial signature? Well, signatures, like you might sign your name, the river is signing its name, and it leaves scars on the landscape. And so you can see where the river has been, which gives you a good idea of where it wants to go, maybe where it could go, where it might go in the future. And this is one way that you can help delineate your fluvial hazard zone. But in a lot of landscapes that we work, particularly urban environments, we do not spy fluvial signatures. This landscape's been so highly altered that it's really hard to tell where the river's been. You can see the main stem again from left to right in the thin blue line, but we don't see any of those areas where we think the river might have been, where they're not as easily discernible. So there are places we can give a little, but not at all, and we don't have any fluvial signatures to work with, but we have this major pinch point, which is a problem for flooding and a problem for the river. So we want to find a Sharpie width that balances that big king size Sharpie to the fine point Sharpie. Find a width that balances people and the river. You comb through your fluvial hazard zone protocol in the appendices, you can find a number of documents and methods which you can use to come up with a planning width that maybe isn't the full meal deal, but also not that precision tool that requires such heavy engineering. Real short, you've got your river here. You look at how tight the curves are. Look at how far apart those curves are as you move down the valley. And then you look at how wide those curves are between each other as you move across the valley. And so you can come up with this meander belt width, which can be used as a planning width. And you can apply to your river corridor. We have our fluvial hazard zone here in pink, and then a narrow width of kind of what's the width the river can deal with. And then you can give that width to your landscape architecture friends. And then they can make it look really nice. And so when they make these beautiful watercolor renderings of a Vision 2045, the widths that are shown on there are based in science and could make sense for the river. All right, problem number 3, and thanks to this webinar series, arguably the most straightforward, is there's planned development encroaching on the river corridor. So we have, again, our long-range expected growth area here in the red dashed line. So what are you going to do for places where we still have some ownership problems, but the development has not yet gotten there? Well, lucky for us, we have the hazard zone, and so it's great. It's looking at our largest study area. Those are the lines that you'll see shown there, shown here in pink, and that is our king size Sharpie. This allows us for Victoria to then take this line and do her job, which is also very hard, but we appreciate it, Victoria, to draw lines of where should we allow development, because we see in these reaches of the river that the river is doing great things. It's keeping the flood relatively contained. You see some healthy lateral migration. You see some healthy vegetation and wildlife using that vegetation. So how can we protect what the river's doing well and also protect people and flooding? So this all sounds really hard, but I do want to offer a story of hope of where this has been done. It can be done even in the most constrained of places. Here we have a Google Earth view of the Toronto, Canada, and it may be hard to see, but there is actually a river coming from the top of your screen. That yellow, which is right next to that highway under West Donlands, it's coming down in a concrete line channel and makes a hard right into Lake Ontario. And over 20 years ago, MBVA was given a similar challenge to do a vision plan for the downriver. They had significant flooding problems and flooding damage, and so they came up with a similar vision plan. And just this past summer, the ribbon was cut, but this reach of river can now pass close to the 500-year flood. And the city and Waterfront Toronto were able to pull together over $1 billion to implement this project, where they pass the flood, but also have urban recreational use and urban ecology coming together. And the spine, the river really here is a spine. And they ended up using a blend of the fine tooth and moderate Sharpie in this solution. So those are 3 strategies to balance healthy river corridors and flood-ready communities. There are a lot more, and there's a lot of gray area nuance we could dive into. But I'll leave you with this quote: "There is a 5th dimension beyond that which is known to man. It is a dimension as vast as space and as timeless as infinity. It is the middle ground between light and shadow, between science and superstition." And now I'm going to pass it to Victoria, who has a hard job of putting all this into practice.
Thanks. And I am looking at time, so I will try to run through my closing slides very quickly. So Greg had mentioned some of the really positive feedback we've gotten from the community so far, but I do want to mention that even though Northern Colorado is, very familiar with flooding, there's still a little bit of a perception that the risk, the flood risk that we face in Greeley can be minimized, or that it can be engineered around. And I think one of the reasons behind that might be that we haven't had a 100-year flood since 1904. And so it might be difficult for our residents or even our decision makers to necessarily connect with what that 100-year storm event might look like. So we are, like I mentioned, in the planning process. So we are hoping to have an adopted vision very soon. And at the same time, it's not too early to start thinking about how we could actually apply everything we've learned from planning and using the fluvial hazard zone to really inform some of our daily tools and our operational decisions. One thing I like to think about is if you don't have alignment between your vision and values at the top, your ordinances, your land use development code, all of your operational tools will actually tell you what your vision is. And if that's not aligned with your stated vision, then it's super important to take the steps to find that alignment. Real quick, this map in green shows our conservation district zoning, which was really based on the FEMA flood zones and the floodway in particular. And so when I say that there might be some perception or minimizing of the flood risk, one thing we've noticed, or one thing I've observed or experienced, especially over the past year, is the FEMA flood maps are really a snapshot in time, and they do change. And we've seen some property owners that were in the conservation district zoning, and now, a new FEMA flood map comes out, and all of a sudden they think, oh, we were out of the risk. We don't have to worry about that anymore. We can rezone to something like industrial, or in some cases, even residential. And so there are some real limitations, with using the FEMA flood maps as your only guiding tool. So one of the things that this planning effort has really allowed us to do is connect some of the benefits when it comes to recreation and habitat and all of the really amazing things that this natural resource provides, connecting that to the flood risk so that the benefits are more holistic or easy to connect to. So even though that 100-year flood might not be something that we can connect to easily, some of these other benefits are more readily they resonate a little bit easier. All right, so just to wrap up, so we have some time for questions. So we have shared this concept with the community, which is super exciting. So we are soliciting feedback on that concept now. We want to refine that before we seek adoption from council. And then, like I said, this is a 20-year plan, and we have a lot of work to do once that's adopted. So, follow along. Like I mentioned, a lot of the fluvial hazard zone and how we might implement that is really exploratory at this point. A lot more conversations need to happen. And I'll just wrap by saying, as a local government or municipality, we're in a really unique position to connect some of these more incremental or parcel level decisions to the big picture and to the river system. And so it's really, it's an amazing opportunity to look at the whole river corridor and start to build those connections so that our residents and our community members really understand how all these pieces fit together. You can follow along at speakupgreeley.com. I've also included a QR code. We do have a survey on our Vision 2045 concept right now. So I would appreciate, any feedback, share with your friends. If you know folks or residents in Greeley, that would be great. And just really appreciate the opportunity to share with you all today.
Thank you so much.
That was fantastic. Thank you all so much. I know Joel's got a question there. I'll start with a quick comment, or since you asked, Victoria. Yeah, I mean, I think that looking at each of you showed that potential, the future growth boundary in the community, and I would love to maybe encourage you all to re-envision that slide, put the fluvial hazard boundary there, and put that dotted line on the outside of it, as if we're projecting ahead that no, we are going to protect this place. And sure, there will be development in it for all the reasons that was listed, but I think some of the magic we need to be working right now is to really bring people's vision ahead and be the leader. So maybe redefining that area to leave that very, you know, when you show your last slide there with the hill shade on the digital elevation model, it's really, you know, it's really obvious where that river channel has been, where the corridor is, you know, and as Emily so well pointed out, rivers are corridors. They're not just lines, and really encouraging the community to grow outside of that boundary, I think is so critical right now. With that in mind, another thing that's come up for me is the idea of the bike paths and the recreational trails, obviously something that our communities want. But having witnessed, you know, a lot of different flood events over the years, I see a lot of them end up in the river as rivers change and rivers move. But I also see a lot of communities attempting to treat bike paths as roads and put in armoring and other aspects to try to prevent rivers from moving just because they paved a bike path. There's kind of like, it's almost like it's a, you know, where we have a road and a highway, a lot more challenging to move, relocate, possible, but challenging. But a bike path should be one of those things that mentally is temporary. If the river is needing to move, we should really strive to, in my opinion, have those be more flexible and not treated like minor roads themselves. And so, yeah, something to just consider for the team. You know, we see these drawings and bike paths on each side of the river, and sure that we've given the river more space now, but also have we really, if we're just kind of, you know, locking in place with recreational paths. So that's it for me. Joel, and actually I think, and everyone that's been on board here, I also want to thank you all and remind folks of the webinars we have coming up, and also say that we can take another 5 minutes, I believe, if anyone does need to hop off, but I know I don't think that we need to leave right away. And I think Joel might have another question.
Well, let's let the team respond to your comments, Michael, and I can start reading some questions.
Yeah, I can take your question, Joel, about the gravel ponds. So yes, in order to fit a 650-foot width corridor through some of these really tight pinch points, there will be some filling of gravel ponds. These are lined with slurry walls, bentonite slurry walls down to bedrock. So while we've shown a preliminary configuration of how that might work, we would really need to get into the detailed technical drawings and work with our engineers to really optimize where that corridor moves through, so that we can efficiently, you know, pour new slurry walls and backfill those areas. You know, obviously you want to keep do as more of a surgical approach, if you will, with that, because it's a very costly intervention. But you know, and there's other areas too where we're currently restricted by some private property that, you know, who knows, down the road may become available. So there's some opportunities to potentially, you know, adjust that corridor and minimize some of that expensive construction.
All right, so we have another question related to adopting the code and criteria to enforce the plan. How long do you expect that process to take? And I know it's not a given where you're going to end up, given elected input and public input along the way.
Yeah, I think that it depends, right? There are other efforts, you know, whenever we talk about our development code, we don't want to, you know, advance one piece without thinking about the bigger picture and how everything fits together. So I do know our community development department is looking at doing an audit of the development code, and so there might be an opportunity to dovetail with that effort. I would hope that we could bring some of, at least maybe not code changes, right, or any any regulations immediately after adoption, but my hope is that we would have a clear path of what we can explore further. So I'm optimistic that 5 years we could make some progress there.
There's another question. I think there's two I can combine here. One is billions with a B for the Canadian project. I heard from Emily. And then funding sources also connected to the Pooter and this potential NISP plans, and then that funds mitigation fund. So maybe those are all connected, but I guess does your project thinking about future curtailing of flood flows in the Pooter Basin, and then what funding sources are you looking at?
Yeah, I can talk about the Portlands in Toronto. Yeah, that is a $1.5 billion project with a B. That's Canadian, so it's slightly less US, but that's funded by all three levels of government. So it's the federal, the provincial, and the city of Toronto, as well as some philanthropic donations as well have gone into that. But that's been a really long process. We won an international design competition for that project in 2007, and we just opened the first phase to the public this year. So it's been a really massive, city building infrastructure project that's been implemented over the course of that time.
As far as like funding goes, I think it's important to note that, when we think about a 20-year vision and framework, what we're hoping to do is really align some of our investments. We do have a lot of infrastructure that already exists in the Pooter River corridor, and a lot of that infrastructure is at risk. So we want to make sure in future decisions about our capital projects or investments that we're really considering things like the Fluvial hazard zone. And so we have not gotten to the point where we have a real clear funding plan. We would need to develop a strategy around that. But I think the important thing is that we're just really clear about what it is that we're hoping the future of the Pooter River corridor looks like, and then we can start defining specific projects and phasing from that work.
Yeah, Joel, for the piece about the flows plan, there have been conversations, Greg has lead a lot of this with the folks on the Pooter River flow plan, and same thing with like trying to convey a river corridor on a map of trying to convey ideas like this at different cycles throughout the year of, NVBA's done a great job of what's this going to look like in the dry season or a really low flow year or a flood year. So I'm trying to build this kind of timing piece and seasonality of use and different years of how people experience the river corridor, and it'll be different depending on the year and what happens with the flows. But it's tough.
Great. I did put a link if you haven't registered for this webinar series and got a forwarded email. I would love to invite you to the future webinars that we're having. So I put a link in there for a Google form and get your contact information and get you added to our email list. I think there's another question related to river play parks, kayak parking. Is that being considered here as well?
Let's see, kayaking. Yeah, well, we did hear a lot from our community members that they want to be on the water. There's a lot of interest, and our Pooter ponds are already well utilized for paddleboarding or kayaking. So that is something that our residents do want to see. One of the challenges with the Pooter River, especially through Greeley, is that the flows are not can't necessarily support that year round, right? So there might be a few weeks out of the year where we could potentially have some tubing. And so the goal would really be to make sure that our water quality can support, people actually being in the water and recreating. But absolutely, that's something we did hear from our community a lot.
And then last question is water quality. So there was some mention about water quality treatment parks and the like. Someone had a question about what are your strategies for agricultural non-point. I'm assuming some of those would be targeted at urban runoff as well.
Yeah, and I think that's really where like the stormwater piece comes into play. So right now we have about 100 outfalls that discharge directly into the Pooter River, and that's without all of that development that you might anticipate north of the river. And so that absolutely is a challenge. And part of that is why we're proposing a plan that would, bring back those outfalls and have the water actually go through some vegetated swales to have some of that, those water quality improvements before it actually discharges into the river.
A lot of work, great work. Excited to see it 2045.
Well, super appreciate the opportunity to share a little bit today. And Speak Up Greeley is definitely the place to stay involved, follow along, and my contact info is also on that webpage as well. So you can always reach out with any additional questions.
Thanks so much, team. Appreciate your time. And we'll be following up with everyone on recorded presentations if you have missed this or want to share it with others. All right. Maybe anything else to add?
No, just thank you so much for sharing this project. It's so exciting.
You're an inspiration for us here in the Grand Valley. So.
Again, I appreciate the opportunity to share. So thank you so much.
Take care.
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you.